Removing negative thoughts all starts with observation. It's not about just focusing on the breath. It's not about just watching your thoughts go by like clouds or forcing the mind to be quiet. And it's certainly not about numbing out the noise with something else. Instead, it starts with the skill of being able to observe what's going on inside you and then deciding to learn the tools you need in order to change it. Many of the tools out there today are good in theory, but they don't work well for a lot of people, or they don't give long-term results. For example, I love what Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing in this space. He transformed my life and taught me a lot of what I needed to know to really get started on my meditation journey. However, his techniques weren't what I needed at the time. I think his research is amazing, and everything he's doing with his live events is pretty spectacular. But at the time, I needed a different set of tools, and I had to go learn that on my own. So in this video, I'm going to share what didn't work about the Joe Dispenza meditations and his overall approach, and what did work for me instead. So why does it start with observation? One of the key aspects of removing negative thoughts that I found was that I have to be able to observe the negative thought first. If I put my attention on something else, that didn't seem to work. One of the things you learn quickly trying to shift your negative thoughts is just think about something else, right? Honestly, that kind of just makes me a little angry hearing that. Just think about something else. Just stop the negative thoughts. Okay. No, that's not happening upstairs, right? That's not what's going on. So being able to just redirect that, even if I could in the moment, it only lasts, let's say, a split second. But the energy behind the negative thought is so strong that it's going to keep going. And it's not just going to get redirected that easily. Hey guys, my name's Andre, and after years of working through my negative thought patterns and quieting the inner critic and the noise in my head, I now teach people how to reprogram themselves so they can get rid of those negative thoughts, the stress and the anxiety and the cause behind it so that it just doesn't happen anymore. I've tried meditation, I've done neurofeedback therapy, I've tried plant medicines, hypnosis, binaural beats, diets and exercise. A lot of different people's meditations from different gurus out there, such as Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins, Teal Swan. But again, a lot of those things weren't the step-by-step tools that I really needed at the time for where I was at. A lot of approaches, and this is like the fundamental shift that I had to learn and experience for myself. The fundamental shift is a lot of meditations, they teach you to not put any attention or focus whatsoever on the negative aspect, on the negative thought, or the critical thoughts or stuff like that. They tell you to avoid them and just push them aside. That's the opposite of what I needed to do in order to get through and break through where I wanted to and make progress that I actually would feel different. For example, meditations that teach you to focus on the breath, right? Basically saying, don't focus on the negative stuff. Don't focus on the things that we're actually trying to change, right? Focusing on the breath, focusing on positive emotions. And this was where I really struggled with Joe Dispenza's work. His meditations in general are, as you focus on the space and you expand, you then find a positive emotion and you feel it and you make yourself feel it so intensely. And I was not able to do that. That was a big struggle for me at the time. So that whole approach of focusing on the positive aspect was something that was a challenge for me, to be honest. It was very counterintuitive because of a lot of teachings go that way, but eventually I had to shift and actually focus on something that was more on the negative side. But in doing so, it allowed me to then finally change things around. And I'm going to get into the details of that. But that was the biggest turning point for me. All of those approaches, such as focusing on the breath or focusing on just the positive things or shifting your perspective right away, they're all forms of avoidance, essentially. We're avoiding the negative side. We're avoiding the thing that we don't want to be experiencing. And there's the quote, right? What we resist persists. So what we avoid is going to continue to happen unless we dive in and actually tackle it directly and shift things. So what I have found works is when you actually lean into the thing that you're avoiding, and it sounds crazy, but you put a little bit more attention on those thoughts and you put more focus on them so that we can then interact with and shift them as needed. And when you do that with the right approach and the right toolkit, things can start to change pretty quickly. And that's eventually what I discovered, and that's what I teach my clients how to do. And so there's a link below if you want to learn more and start shifting things pretty fast. But again, it's the opposite approach of what most other modalities talk about from the conventional wisdom and the conventional advice. Joe Dispenza's meditations, again, I think they're great. They teach you to focus on the positive emotion. And they do this so that you kind of envision the life or the future that you want, and you start feeling positive emotions, and you kind of mix those two together. And that's a way you can manifest the future and the reality that you want to experience. If you have a challenge, like I did, in feeling that positive emotion, then that whole approach, in a way, is not necessarily working, right? There's a key piece that's missing in that approach. And that was the struggle. That was the challenge. I don't think everyone can do that. As much as we love the idea of wanting to be happy and feel joy and feel love and feel all these things, some of us get conditioned and programmed in such a way where we've numbed ourselves out. And we've numbed ourselves out because we don't want to feel the pain that we've experienced in life. And in doing so, when you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. And that was a hard lesson that I learned. When you start numbing out the negative emotions that you don't want to feel, you're also numbing out the positive ones. You're numbing out everything. And if we want to undo that, we have to be willing to feel the negative emotions again. And that starts with observing the negative thoughts that we're having. There's way too much noise going on. And I've spent, at least in my head, I don't know about you, at least there used to be, I had spent 3 decades suppressing my emotions. And I was not going to be able to just pull up positive, happy, joyous feelings just on demand like I wanted to. It wasn't going to happen, even if I tried. And in addition to that, I didn't know this at the time, but my body was holding so much stress and so much tension that even if I wanted to, my body was just not on board. The body wasn't going to let the mind calm down because it was a lot of the tension that was stored in the body that was driving the mental noise in the first place. So there were many forces working against the positive mindset that I was trying to achieve. And in society today, we get rewarded for being smart. And this is part of, I don't want to say the problem, it just is, right? But it's part of the way it is. And so we get rewarded for being smart. Because we get rewarded for being smart and intelligent and problem solving and, using our brains and our minds for things, once our mind starts to run negative, it can be hard to stop because we're so used to using our mind and giving it all our energy. And not only that, but our brain is actually wired to focus on the negative. It's wired to focus on negative things for survival, because back when we were running across the plains of Africa, if there was a lion chasing us, we had to focus on that in order to run away from it in the other direction. And we had to say, I need to get to where I'm going as fast as possible so that I can get away from this thing. But if I'm not paying attention to it, if I'm not aware of it, if I'm not focused on that threat, then I'm not going to be able to feel like I need to run, and then I'm going to die. So our brains are wired for negativity. And once those neural pathways become very strong, again, it can become a challenge to start to remove them. And from what I've found, removing them happens not by just glazing over them or building a bridge over them, but by actually getting in there and ripping them out. Big difference in the theory and the philosophy behind the whole approach. So if we break down to the root level of what thoughts even are, remember that I said it all starts with observation. The more I dug into my own research and my own experience of what are these thoughts, where are they coming from, I learned I learned so many things about the body and just what it is and how it works. And one of the things you're going to learn is that the emotions, for example, that we've a lot of times suppressed are just energy and motion. And that's what emotion stands for. What I also learned and realized is that thoughts are also energy and motion, but they're energy and motion in the head. Emotions are energy and motion more so in the body. And when we have energy running around in our head, in our minds, in our brains, we attach language to those thoughts, to that energy. And then that becomes a thought. Okay, not everyone has an inner voice. I think it's about maybe 10% of the population doesn't have an inner voice, maybe less. They think in pictures and movies and stuff like that. But for those of us who do have an inner voice, when that energy comes to the mind, comes to the head, it attaches to language. And now we have thoughts. And they can be intrusive thoughts, or maybe they're the negative thoughts. So with that observation in mind, thoughts are just energy in motion with words attached to them, then we can start working at that root level. We can work at the level of the energy that's running the show. And when we do that, it gives us our power back. And it gives us a more powerful approach than just avoiding and not thinking about the thing that we're trying to change, but actually diving in directly and ripping things out that we need to rip out. What I realized, and the work that I ended up doing, which is the thing that finally changed things for me, was actually using my mental energy to focus and put my attention on the negative thoughts, and then do some like Jedi mind trick and some mind hacks. And this is what I teach my clients. I can't share them with you here, just it wouldn't be fair. But doing the work internally to actually rip them out and let them go and release them. And if you do that repeatedly, over and over and over and over again, you're going to change your mind. And how long does it take? Well, it almost doesn't matter how long it takes, because if it took you 30 years to get to this state, what if it takes 1 to clean it up? That's not bad. That's not a bad trade. I've had clients change in months, like 2 months. So as much as I appreciate the intention behind a lot of the meditation work out there and information, it wasn't what I needed to get started. It wasn't sustainable. It felt more like a Band-Aid on top of the negative thinking problem that I was having. And it wasn't enough of a dig into the roots and really change things type of approach, which is what I was looking for. So I hope that makes sense, guys. I hope that resonated with some of you. I know it's a counterintuitive way of thinking. It's a counterintuitive philosophy. It is a against the grain approach. But I'll tell you what, there are so many times where I had an against the grain approach work for me more than I can count. And I just think it's really fascinating that conventional wisdom teaches XYZ thing and to go in this direction, and a lot of times going in almost the exact opposite direction can be more effective. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one.